Football show. We'll be over to Gothenburg later on this hour ahead of Ireland's World Cup qualifier against Sweden. It kicks off 5:30 tomorrow. The game is live with us on the OTB Sports app or OTB Sports Radio. So from 5:30 we have commentary. Build-up starts at 5:15 and we will check in Gothenburg later on just after 9:30 or so. Very happy to say in the meantime, well, I called him earlier on because we had late withdrawal. We were in dire need and we needed some top punditry. Top punditry for such a big game. And I said to the lads, I know who to call.
Lads are really struggling. We're really struggling here.
I know who to call. Now, Damon Delaney wasn't available, but
the bottom rung of the ladder, clearly.
Thank you so much. I know you hate doing stuff over the phone.
I could detect the tone of desperation in your voice, Joe, at the other end of the phone. I hadn't got the heart to put the phone down on you.
You could hear the blubbing. Please, Kenny, please.
Yeah, off centre.
So thank you so much for doing this on a Monday evening. We are obviously starting with the game between Manchester City and Liverpool. This game had a long billing. I mean, for about a month we've been counting down to this game.
Yeah.
Geez, it generally does live up to expectation in terms of quality and the relentlessness of the whole 90 minutes. What did you make of it in those terms? Yeah,
well, first of all, I'll have to shout up a little bit of a caveat. I was in a pub watching this game with a lad who actually talks more than me, Joe, believe it or not. You actually know who he is. I won't name names, but so the game probably didn't have
into 53106
undivided attention. You know what it's like when you're in that kind of pub environment. You're watching the game, but you're probably not quite analysing as you would do maybe at home in your kind of living room. So I'll throw that small caveat in before I start dissecting the game in minute detail. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. Totally engrossed in it. I think like everybody else who watched the game, I think everybody understood the significance of the game, the result, what was at stake. And I don't think the game let us down. Real kind of intensity to the game, total commitment, from both sets of players. I read a little bit of the comments this morning in the papers, and very complimentary in terms of like the quality of football in one or two ways, from a couple of people saying, well, this was top class, this is the best of the best, we're not going to see this, we should count our blessings, we got these two teams. I must admit, I wasn't done what you thought, but I wasn't quite buying into it in terms of that was both teams playing at their very best. They left everything out there in terms of energy, commitment and all those things. But I think of the both teams, Liverpool in particular, I thought weren't at their best. I mean, that wasn't Liverpool's collective best performance for me by a long shot. In fact, if I looked at that Liverpool team, I'd probably ask you again, I can't think of one Liverpool player I'd probably say gave him maybe an 8 out of 10 performance. I mean, collectively they dug in, they showed a huge amount of character, particularly in that second half. They dragged themselves back into the game, and I think overall I'd have to say probably deserved their point. But that wasn't the type of performance I think Klopp would have hoped for, and the Liverpool players would have hoped for, and what they probably needed to beat that Manchester City team. I think City were closest to their best, Joe, collectively as a team, than Liverpool were. But I think it's huge credit to Liverpool that even in those kind of circumstances, when they weren't at their best, they found a way to drag themselves back into the game. Could even have won it potentially, you could argue, but could very easily have lost it late on. So yeah, great entertainment, really enjoyed the game, and yeah, it continues on. But I think Liverpool have been a reasonably good place off the back of it. It's a funny thing to say. Obviously, I've talked down a little bit maybe their performance, but the fact they've got out of the game and they're still on the coattails of Manchester City breathing down their necks. I think if anything, City will be the ones who might be smarting a little bit at the fact that they didn't put some clear distance between themselves and Liverpool off the back of the performance.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you on Liverpool. Maybe what made it so fascinating was that they weren't at their best and they just dug in. It almost was a testament to what they stand for as a team in some respects. Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. Yeah, I think that was the positive, that they were never going to down tools, of course not, but in kind of adversity, and they were in adversity for periods, certainly in that first half. Manchester City were the better team, and it's one of those things, Joe, some days you just know it's just not there. You get that bit of a sense of it maybe early in the game. You're not saying it to each other on the pitch and you're shouting at each other and you're demanding more of each other, but you just know as the game goes on, it's not quite happening for us today. The kind of cohesion isn't there. I'd say in possession and out of possession. I don't think in terms of that high intensity press from Liverpool was quite there at its best, as we've seen previously. And in terms of the quality of football at times, you know, how kind of penetrating, productive they can be at times when they get going in possession of the ball, weren't quite at their best as well. They probably recognised that as the game was going on, but still showed a huge amount of character, almost to accept the reality. Of course, you're striving to do better and find a bit of rhythm and find your best form as the game goes on, but some days it just doesn't happen for you. And you don't want to have that against a team of Manchester City's quality. But like I said, you know, they dug in, they scrapped, you know, they didn't go under, they kept themselves in the game, got themselves back into the game. And yeah, either side could have won it in that kind of second half period. So yeah, so no, I wouldn't be holding it up there, maybe one or two other people as well. This is the creme de la month, you know, this is, you know, high quality. It doesn't get any better than this. Not quite if you break the game down on a few different levels, but in terms of, you know, excitement and, you know, being totally invested in the game, you know, whether you're watching or certainly the players on the game, yeah, it was great to watch.
Do you see this as, in general terms, regardless of Liverpool maybe not being at their very best yesterday, but do you see this rivalry as Manchester City, for all the money they've spent and with Pep, with their noses in front, and Liverpool going along with them as best they can, but City are the better team?
No, I don't see. But I think the sand is shifting all the time. So I would have made, and probably would still make the argument to a point, and we've had a discussion before about Liverpool play a brand of football, a style of football that City at times find difficult to deal with. You know, Liverpool don't play Manchester City at their own game. They don't say to Manchester City, we're going to come onto the pitch today and, you know, outpass you, we're going to have more possession than you, we're going to dominate the ball more than you, you know, we're going to work away slowly up the pitch, we're going to suffocate you, you know, and gradually wear you down and, you know, open you up, that type of. Liverpool don't do that. A little bit more direct in terms of their style of play. We spoke about this before, back to front a little bit earlier, into the wide areas, crosses earlier into the box, that type of thing. More of a high energy, you know, kind of physical game. And City, I think, have found that difficult to deal with over the past couple of years. So no, I wouldn't say City had a better team for me. I think they're very much on an equal footing. But I think there's just one. Looking at that performance, yes, and not just yesterday, probably for a small amount of time, only of late, I look at that Manchester City team, and I just think maybe at the moment, potentially going forward, they're in a slightly better place than Liverpool. I look at Liverpool, and we're all huge fans of that squad that Klopp's put together. But I just feel as if there's a couple of small issues there potentially going forward that Klopp's going to have to address in terms of the makeup of that team. So we've always spoken about, Joe, about that axis in midfield of Fabinho and Henderson, always. You know, those big games come up, boom, first two names on the team sheet, and then you pick your third player in midfield, and we can have that argument in terms of, you know, who best complements those two. But I think probably over the past year, it's the first time I've been looking at Jordan Henderson. I know he's had a couple of injury problems, etc. But I just think there's been a drop-off there in terms of that kind of physical intensity which he kind of plays at. And he's driven that team forward for a number of years now. That kind of drive he has, and not just drive, but physical drive, ability to drive across the pitch, make tackles, interceptions, track back, even in possession, get Liverpool going forward to an extent. You know, he's been an absolute machine in there in that central midfield there. He's been absolutely key for them, particularly in terms of that kind of high press against opposition teams. But you're just seeing that this year, Joe, I mean, that would have been unheard of maybe 18 months ago in a game of that stature, Jordan Henderson getting pulled after 78 minutes. It just wouldn't happen, Joe, would it?
No, and he was rested against Benfica as well. Yeah,
exactly. So now Klopp's looking at him for whatever reason. He knows, he sees him training every day. Sports science him to be in his end, etc., etc. And they're basically saying to him, this lad can play physically at the level that he did 2 years ago. That's what it looks to me. We're going to have to be careful. We're going to have to wrap him in cotton wool. And I think, I'm not saying Jordan Henderson's career, Liverpool is over. Of course it's not. I think he's going to be a key player going forward over the next kind of year or two. But I think that Jordan Henderson at his best that we saw 2 years ago, I think that player is slowly diminishing before his eyes. He's going to have to find a slightly different role in the team going forward, and that'd be a small worry for me, because that kind of DNA of that Liverpool team in terms of that real kind of drive, pace, energy in that central midfield area, and he was the one driving it, Joe. If he's not going to be that type of player going forward, then that'd be a small worry for me, and that's central midfield. You look at Fabinho yesterday, Joe, and Fabinho's a good player. That's quite the worst game I've seen him playing Liverpool jersey. He looked a little bit all at sea yesterday. He just couldn't get close. He was arriving a little bit late. Players are going past him. The De Bruyne goal was a clear example of that. Just dropped the shoulder. Got away from him kind of. I know he's got no recovery anyway. He's not the quickest anyway, Fabinho, but he's a great reader of the game. He senses where the ball's going. He intercepts things perfectly well. Go gadget leg, sticks out a toe, intercepts the ball, wins the ball back. He's great at that, but it just wasn't there for him yesterday. People were ghosting by him. Bernardo Silva knocked the pass him late in the second half. He had to clear him out. So he was well below par. Yeah. And Fabinho's a different type of beast to Henderson. He hasn't got his energy level. He's not good naturally as Henderson, but he sits in there, he's disciplined, he reads the game well, he intercepts things great, and Henderson goes after. He's like an animal higher up the pitch in terms of that press, going after, winning tackles. So for me, Henderson in a reduced capacity going forward, that's a small issue for Liverpool, which I think they're going to have to rectify, to the extent where I think if Liverpool are going to spend big again going forward, whether it's in the summer or maybe the window after that, they're going to have to spend big on a central midfield player. And people might say, you're joking, they've got about 6-7, they've got too many anyway. Well, I think he might have too many central midfielders, but for me, he might have to sacrifice 2 or 3 of them, get them out the door, and get one top-class midfielder into the football club for the medium to long term. I think there's a few of them out there. I think there's a few outstanding young midfielders around Europe. So that's what I'm talking about going forward. I look at that Manchester City team, and I kind of don't see those issues potentially going forward for Guardiola in too many positions, but just kind of that central midfield area for me, Liverpool, because of the type of football that they play, Joe, I think they need to find something else in there going forward. If Jordan Henderson isn't going to be that type of player that he has been and can't play at that level consistently that he has done previously in a Liverpool jersey. Yeah,
on Fabinho, even for the first goal, De Bruyne ghosted by him there, which was quite unlike him. And Henderson's an interesting case because he is so much more than just a player. He's almost kind of a cultural architect in there. And there are times where he sets a tempo, even just with his passing. 10-yard pass, he'll smash it at someone almost to say, come on, get going. And you almost want to keep somebody like that around it, akin to Ferguson keeping his Scholes around as long as possible.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, he won't be out the door.
Thiago was very good, wasn't he?
Sorry,
Thiago.
I thought he'd done okay, to be honest with you. But I was having this conversation in the pub with a friend of mine after the game, and I said, look, there was one great diagonal pass early on to Trent Alexander-Arnold out on the right wing, and there was a couple of more passes, and eventually kind of led to that kind of opening. Josh a goal, but I said, and a friend of mine's going to.
Can I stop you there for a second?
Yeah.
Can we just name this friend? Can I have a guess?
Yeah.
I don't really know who your friends are. I'm trying to. Who talks a lot? Alan Cawley.
No, I'm not naming names. I'm not naming names. I'm not going to drop this fella in there because he was on the lash to a certain extent and enjoying himself. But no. But getting back to the football. But I did say to him, Thiago, and I might be wrong again, like I said, I wasn't actually analysing the game from 1 minute to the 90th, but apart from that big diagonal pass, I said to him, look, what was the standout moments for Thiago? Where was that 2, 3, 4, 5 real kind of penetrating passes, breaking the lines or really opening up the Manchester City defence? Because for me, as you know, Joe, he has to do that continuously, because for me, he's a passenger when you haven't got the ball. We saw it yesterday in the yellow card, could have got himself sent off, and I don't beat him up over because he can't defend, so that's an issue with him, and that's the baggage you have to carry when you put him into the team. Is he giving you enough in possession? Is he haunting the opposition team enough with his passing in terms of getting Liverpool on the attack, in terms of assists and maybe even occasionally goals to kind of supplement what you have to carry with him in the team, because he hasn't got those defensive qualities of other Liverpool players, and that's just the way it is. So again, that's been a conversation about Liverpool since he's been at the football club. Thiago, and we've spoken about kind of Curtis Jones, the quality he has off Chamberlain, Keita, that kind of physicality which they bring. But the conversation has always been Henderson, Fabinho, let's have a conversation about that third central midfield player, isn't it? Whereas now, over the past year, just looking at Jordan Henderson and just feeling as if that just a drop off in his performance levels. Now, what does that mean for the team? Does he stay? He certainly stays with the football club, such as his importance in the dressing room, his stature, in terms of his influence around the team. You don't get rid of that too easy. And of course, he's going to come in and play his fair share of the games. But I just don't feel as if, I just got that feeling watching him certainly the past 6 months on the pitch, he may not be able to influence games as he has done previously, just due to really deterioration in his kind of physical conditioning, which happens to us all, arrives at, to us all at some point. But that's going to be key, how Klopp sees that going. Does he feel as if, well, look, do you know what, going forward, I'm going to go for a more technically based game. I'm going to build this team around Thiago, Harvey Elliott. They're going to be me two number 8s in central midfield, with Fabinho behind them. We're not going to be maybe as successful as a pressing team as we have done previously, but I'm going to get more highly technically gifted players in that central area of the pitch, and we're going to go a different route. Now that's a conversation which you can have as well, Joe. There's no kind of right or wrong. I don't know. Again, I don't know how you see it, but for me, that's kind of playing into Manchester City's hands, because nobody's better at that type of football than Manchester City. So for me, Liverpool have done the right thing in terms of how they've put it up to Manchester City the past couple of years, by going a different route, by playing a different type of football that we've spoken about, that kind of high energy, back to front a little bit quicker, going in behind earlier, using the strengths of that front three that they have from 4-5 now, which you'd call it. So that would be interesting. Be very interesting to see how Klopp sees it, and whether you see the likes of he goes and spends big again, the likes of Jude Bellingham. For me, that's the type of player Liverpool going forward need to get in, box to box, high energy. He's got physically imposing. He's still developing, the young kid. He's actually a very good footballer as well, technically very good. But that type, top class, box to box, really 6, number 8, can really do anything for you. I think that's the type of midfielder Liverpool are going to need going forward, if they're not going to maybe just drop off ever so slightly in terms of staying on the coattails of Manchester City. That's a small thing now, Joe. That's not something which is gaping. You're looking at the screen and think, oh my God, Henderson's having a nightmare, he's got to come out of the team. But you just get a sense of it, not just a sense of, I can kind of see it on the pitch, and I've seen a little bit where Henderson is. I've always thought, well, that's interesting. If there is a drop off there in his physical levels, what's the answer? Is the answer you're going down a different route, or is the answer you go and replace him with that type of, with a young Jordan Henderson, and who's out there to come in, and how much they'll have to spend to go and get him? But that's maybe a little bit for the future, Joe. Maybe 6 months down the road. Yeah. But at the moment, I think Liverpool are still in it. I think Manchester City have the advantage, certainly in terms of the points advantage, and clearly they've got the easier run in, Joe. I think that's pretty obvious. But the fact they're both still in Champions League, the games this week, the FA Cup game, I'd expect them both to get through to the semi-finals of the Champions League, and then managers are going to have to navigate a route for their teams in terms of squad selection, who do you pick, squad rotation for those particular games, and that'll be fascinating to see. That's a big challenge. There's no bigger challenge for a club manager, I don't think. If you get your team, you're going for a league title, you're neck and neck with your opponents, you're both in the latter stages in the Champions League. That's a huge challenge when every decision you make in terms of team selection is absolutely key between now and the end of the season. So that'll be fascinating, but I still think it's too close to call. I understand if most people, I can understand the argument, City are favourites now. I think that's a fair argument, and it's probably the stronger argument at this moment. But because it's Liverpool, and because of that quality which they have in terms of just that collective togetherness, the drive, everything, the manager, players, crowd, club, the whole thing, they just won't go away. And Guardiola know that they're on their coattails. One small slip, this Liverpool team may not be playing quite at their best at the moment, but they're still good enough to get their heads in front and go and win this league title.
Gabriel Jesus started and scored. Pep Guardiola was asked about Jesus starting ahead of the likes of Grealish or Mahrez, for instance, and I'm going to need you to give me more of an answer than he did. So Pep said, Gabriel deserved to play because he's a fantastic person. So that's not the full story, I would suspect. What's your logic on this? You wouldn't have heard it in the pub, for instance, like the sense of Gary Neville and I think Jamie Carragher was that Pep went with Sterling and Jesus because they could run in behind this high Liverpool line. Now, I would think that Mahrez and Grealish should be perfectly capable of doing something similar. So it's more for me, it's got to be more for me than just an ability to run in behind, even though we did see Jesus do that on occasion. So what's your read on this Grealish, essentially, but this Grealish, Mahrez versus Jesus for this big game dynamic?
Yeah, well, the surprise for me was that, maybe not huge surprise, not surprise really in terms of Guardiola and team selection when it comes to these big games, Joe. I mean, he's flummoxed us all the past a number of years in terms of key selections and even tactical setup of the team for kind of big games. For me, the first forward on the team sheet for Manchester City, that front three, Joe, the first player on the team sheet for the Liverpool game would have been Mahrez. Because for me, he's been the most impressive forward probably for about a year now. I think he's been absolutely exceptional. I think his goal return over the past this year is phenomenal. He might be the joint top scorer, Joe, and I think his level, his performance has been absolutely fantastic. So he would have been my first starter playing that right of a three. I think Foden has kind of excelled on that false number 9. I wouldn't be a huge fan of it in particular. We've had that discussion, but Foden is very comfortable there, and I can understand the argument him playing that false 9 position. And then you can have the argument really is down that left-hand side, Grealish or Sterling. I think it was interesting he flipped Sterling into the middle and Foden out to the left, because I think if there is a small little bit of weakness in that Liverpool defence, we know where it is in behind Alexander-Arnold, particularly with Joel Matip, slightly slow recovery when the ball's in behind. And Manchester City clearly targeted that area of the pitch, particularly first half, Joe. You know, that high line. It was no surprise that kind of Foden in particular was continually making those runs in behind, a bit of eye contact with the Man City player in possession, and they were looking for that ball in behind as early as possible for that run. So that was pretty obvious, and I think by playing Foden out there and Sterling, I think they kind of targeted that side of the pitch to say, yeah, this is kind of our way in. Not so much the other side, Van Dijk obviously, and Robertson probably a little bit more capable, more competent in terms of defensive responsibilities. But that right when Matty plays with Trent Alexander-Arnold down that side, that's pretty much always your way in, Joe. That's not a big secret, is it, in terms of how do we get at this Liverpool team, how do we get in behind this Liverpool defence, how do we break this high line? It's pretty much down that right hand side. So I thought that clearly came into his decision making in terms of Foden on the maybe thought Foden a bit more defensive responsibility. He would track Trent Alexander as well. He could trust him to go up and down the pitch, and he had the legs to do it for 90 minutes. That might have been all of these factors, Joe. I think you give some thought before you put the team on the pitch. But the biggest surprise for me was Mahrez not starting. Now people say, oh, the chance at the end. Yes, the chance at the end. Yeah, fair enough. But I think his form has been as good as anybody. Actually, I think he's been their outstanding forward player for some time now. So that was the surprise for me.
So why Jesus then? What do you think Pep was thinking?
Well, no, I think he likes. I like Jesus. People actually continue telling me, "Oh, Manchester City haven't got a centre forward." Well, they do. Jesus is a centre forward. I mean, if you look at Jesus in terms of,
he never plays him there though.
No, he never plays in there. No, but he is a centre forward. Like, I mean, I played centre half the first, 24. I played one game at left wing. It doesn't mean I'm a left wing. I've been brought up. I've been developed as a central defender. Jesus, and if you look from what I've read of him in terms of coming up early clubs, South America, he's a centre forward. That's how he's been schooled. That's how he's been coached. Now Guardiola has utilised him a couple of different areas. I think that's probably a compliment to the player, that he can play him in a wide area. He's got good game intelligence. He can play in those wide areas. Understands what's required of him. He works very hard for the team. He's
do you think it's that? Do you think it's that he works very hard and is diligent, and that's what got him in over Mahrez?
Yeah, I think so.
He's like morphing into Dirk Kuyt here
in terms of our possession of the ball. Liverpool's fullback sending them high up the pitch as they do, trying to get as much ball as quickly to your fullback. Not how effective Liverpool can be. Robertson and Trent Alexander get on the ball 30 yards from the opposition goal in space, not being tracked potentially by opposition wingers. So that might have been an argument. I think Mahrez has done better in that respect. You can't survive in this at Manchester City as a forward if you're not prepared to track back. But some players are just they're better at it, Joe. They see danger quicker. They're a little bit more disciplined. They get back into defensive positions earlier, kind of goal side. And I'd probably say, Jesus, you should probably trust him a little bit more. But Mahrez, for me, like the qualities, which particularly off that right hand side, Joe, that's what he's at his best. Receive the ball, coming on the inside, little combinations. He can go on the outside as well on his right side. He works really well with Walker, drifting inside Walker on the overlap. So that was a surprise for me that Mahrez didn't actually play. But I could understand the kind of the Sterling Foden access over the other side of the pitch. So kind of that made a little bit of sense to me. I thought he had a little bit of joy during the game in terms of that kind of high line and just getting a little bit of joy. Balls in behind that Liverpool defence. Got away with one late on Liverpool, didn't they? Sterling went through. He's just like a smidgen offside before he put the ball into the net, wasn't it? So yeah. So I suppose it wouldn't be a Pep Guardiola selection if there wasn't one. Maybe you're kind of scratching your head a little bit, but but Mahrez was the one for me, because I think he's become a bit of a killer over the past year or so in terms of the quality of his performances and even finishing, the quality of his finishing, albeit he didn't take the one late on. Although, to be honest with you, Joe, I thought he'd done the right thing late on. People are saying, oh, wouldn't he smash it? If you kind of look, by the time he got to strike the ball, Matip had got himself back in his face, really. But it's very difficult to smash that ball, and get beyond the Joel Matip. Like, he wouldn't have got a block on that. For me, it was actually there for the chip. It was great vision to realise that's the kind of finish that was required for me. He just didn't execute it. That was a problem. Just got underneath it, which was unusual for him. Technically, he's so good. But I wouldn't be certain to be overcritical of certainly the Manchester City performance, because I thought they played well. I thought it was a really good Manchester City performance, all in all. And I think the small bit of regret, maybe the end of the season they've won the league title and whatever. Of course, there'll be no regret. But if they give up that lead and Liverpool get their noses in front and take that title, I think they'll look back to this game, Manchester City, and feel as if we should have put them to the sword. We had an opportunity. And we didn't take it. Listen,
thank you so much for digging us out here at short notice.
All right.
Yeah.
No problem, John.
You were top.
Right. Get a bit of toast on there. Get the kettle on. Get the toast and the toaster.
How did you get on at left wing that time, by the way? Skinned them, killed them, did you?
Left wing. No, I just took that position out there. I'm trying to think if I ever actually ended up in that position. Jordan me and Tory. The only reason I ended up in the left wing position was when I was designated as a man marker a couple of times in my career, and I was literally following people all over the pitch, Bielsa style, man marking. I might have ended up in the left wing on that occasion, but that would have been about it.
Fair enough. Thanks again. Appreciate it, Kenny. Cheers.
Nice one, Joe. Take care.
Kenny Cunningham with us there. Looking back on Manchester City 2, Liverpool 2. We'll touch on the other results from the weekend across the football show this week. Our football show coverage is brought to you by Sky, proud partner of the women's national football team. Out, believe together, and we can go anywhere. We're going to take a short break. The Irish football team in action in Sweden tomorrow. We're going to check in ahead of the kick-off 5:30 on Tuesday. We're going to check in with Aisling O'Reilly next.